going to look at now changes in income and prices and the effect they have when we look at maximization of utility with a budget constraint. I'm going to start with one concept here that's quite important when individuals making a choice. So here we've got a person with, let's say, I think we had this before, price of McNuggets are $2, Timbits is $1, and we've got a budget of $60, for example. It's indicated here. The person chooses this point B where they have 30 McNuggets and they have 20 Timbits. The budget constraint, the slope, as I've noted before, is the relative prices. So we've got, for example, minus 30 over 60 if we look at it mathematically, but it's also equal to 1 over 2, which is the price of a Timbit. You'll notice this here is equal to Px, and this is Py. Fine. But notice something as well, is that the slope of the indifference curve is different in different places. I've described it as the marginal rate of substitution. It can also be considered as the change in the marginal utility for the good X divided by the change in the utility of good Y, keeping utility constant. That means to say the indifference curve means that the happiness factor is the same. I'm going to look at this because this concerns welfare economics. I'm going to look at this a bit later. But for the moment, we can just say that for point B, the marginal rate of substitution, the value of it has to be the same as the budget constraint. The two lines are tangent, which is also tantamount to saying is that if everybody faces the same prices, then everybody must have the same marginal rate of substitution. Again, this is going to become an important result when we look at what is referred to as welfare economics, or looking at the efficiency of an economy as a whole. Okay, let's take a look at the idea of changing a person's income. Okay, fine, we've got an example. We've got good X and good Y. Give the person $200. They choose to purchase the bundle of B1, which we can sort of, if you want, we can call this Y1 over here for the quantity, and this is the quantity of X1. Now, what happens if we double the person's income? Well, in this case, we can see that the amount they have available to spend increases. Just arbitrarily charged it from $200 to $400. I've kept the prices constant. And you'll notice now the person moves up to another bundle, B2, where it happens where they've dramatically increased the amount of good Y they purchase, marginally or very little increase the quantity of good X. This is going to depend on the individual and their preferences. Different people may choose to spend their money differently as their income rises. We can say for sure that the person is better off at B2 compared to B1, and we can see the change in the utility there. There's a big change in the consumption of good Y, relatively small change in the good X. In those circumstances, we refer to good Y as a superior or luxury good. I've said to give the example of gasoline. You can imagine something like kerosene, for example, that's jet fuel. So as people's income rises, they tend to travel a lot more. They're flying in airplanes more frequently, and so as a result, they consume more gasoline or kerosene. Number of metro tickets they purchase may increase, but increase less so. And in fact, in some cases, an inferior good would mean that they purchase less. We're going to look at this in the future, but I wanted to show this to you in the sense of an indifference curve. Some examples of this, and again, this is empirical because this may change over time. Different people may view this differently, but some of the examples of superior luxury goods are air travel, safety, cleanliness in general. People that are wealthier tend to have take their properties, keep it cleaner. This is true for societies. Charity, rich people tend to give more than poor people. Inferior goods of lousy wine, secondhand clothes, public transport, food in general. If somebody's poor, they tend to spend a lot of their income on food. As their income rises, they'll start spending money on other things. And then there's something called a normal good, which means that just as goods increase, or as incomes increase, the proportion stays relatively the same. So, for example, clothing, education, healthcare is a good example. Savings, people tend to put aside roughly the same percentage of their income as their income rises. A little point here is that homothetic preferences or homothetic indifference curves mean that everything is a normal good. there are no superior or inferior goods. The proportion stays the same, and that's incidentally the case of all of the indifference curves that you have in the quizzes where we've. And this is due to the mathematical formulation of the curves. They're not realistic in that sense. Okay, what about a price change? Now, we're not going to change the income, we're going to change the price. So in this case, I've got a case here where gasoline is $1.50 a liter. Metro tickets are, let's say, $3. A person has a budget here of $300, so they can spend it all on gasoline, all on tickets. They happen to choose the point B1, so we can see the number of tickets. Roughly, just looking at this very quickly, I'd say this is something like, say, about 200. They buy 200 liters of gasoline. This might be in a month or something, and it looks to be something like here at about 4. I don't know if the numbers work out. This would be, at $3, this would be about 33 tickets. Now, what happens if there's a sale on Metro tickets? So it falls to $1.50, but we leave the price of gasoline constant here. This is incorrect. This should be $1, not $1.50. So this changes now from $3. This is going to change to $1.50. And now we can redraw the budget constraint, which means now that the person can purchase 200 tickets because they're half price, which again means that we're going to move to a higher indifference curve. They choose a bundle B3. In this case, they happen to buy more Metro tickets, but they also buy more gasoline. But economists break this change down into two movements. There's an initial movement from B1 over to what's called B2, in which an individual stays on the same utility function or the same indifference curve. They say the same level of utility. And then afterwards, we see an income change. It's as if these two lines are parallel. These ones here, so it's as if we separate down into a change in the price and then a change in the income. And this is defined as a substitution effect, B1 to B2. And in this case, you can see that what happens, because of the lower price of the tickets, somebody chooses to buy quite a few more tickets and less gasoline. Tickets are cheaper. But then as a result of this drop in the price, it's like giving the person extra money. It's like a raise in their income. And so as a result, we move from B2 to B3. As the income rises, gasoline or kerosene, if you will, is a superior good. Metro tickets are an inferior good. So while we've lowered the price of tickets, the person feels wealthier, so they start buying more gasoline than they would tickets. The income effect is the change from B2 to B3. The substitution effect is always negative. That means to say that if we lower the price of a good, the person will always want to prefer to purchase that good. That's the substitution effect. But if we lower the price, at the same time, it's as if the person has more money, so there's going to be an income effect. The income effect can be positive or negative depending upon whether the good is a superior good, in which the income goes up, they'll purchase more of it, or they could be negative, meaning to say that they could purchase less of the good. Both effects can be either strong or weak. Generally speaking, though, the substitution effect dominates the income effect, and so the law of demand typically is if the price of something goes down, person purchases more of it. You can imagine it in this context. If we lower the price of McNuggets, what does a person do? Well, they could buy more McNuggets, that's true, but it means that they don't have to spend so much money on McNuggets. It's in effect like having more money, so they might choose to buy more Coke or more of something else, or they could even choose to save the money and purchase something else. In a nutshell, we're looking at the substitution effect, which is the encouragement to purchase more of the item, and the income effect is, well, what do you do with this extra money? You can change the context completely into something like airbags. What happens with airbags? Well, we've lowered the price of a accident in the sense that if you get injury, so that encourages you to drive more recklessly, but it also means that there's an income effect, and so there's fewer deaths. The same applies to legalized abortion in the 90s. There have been studies on this sort of thing. It falls into the context of what's called the substitution effect and the income effect. Lastly, I want to talk about this idea of two different goods, comparing them, and I'll start first with the idea of substitutes. So here we've got a case of beer that you can purchase at a local dépanneur, beer that you can buy at Provigo. So there's a choice between, the good is the same, the hassle is going to, you have to walk further to go to Provigo, and it may not be as open frequently, and the dépanneur is just down the street. Okay, fine. So we've got a budget constraint. I'm not going to look at the prices and so on. And a person chooses bundle B. That means to say they occasionally buy beer at Provigo. Typically, they buy it at the local dépanneur. And then, I don't know, here we can see the quantity they purchase of each item. And then imagine that Provigo has a sale on beer. The price of beer at the dépanneur is the same. So we draw a new budget constraint. We've got this situation over here. And we can notice now that because of the sale of beer at Provigo, there's a big change in the quantity of the beer that the person buys at the dépanneur, and instead they start buying it at Provigo instead. So now we can refer to these two goods as substitutes. That means to say one can replace the other. And so another view of it is that the person is sensitive to price changes. Look at the shape of the indifference curve. They tend to be relatively flat. This is going to depend on the individual, and it's going to depend on the goods as well. But typically, and we'll look at this again later in practical terms, in viewing it, how would you go about measuring the price changes? What would induce a person to change their purchases of the items? Good X and good Y in this case are substitutes. There's another relationship. We refer to goods as complements. Now here I've got Big Macs and French fries. Imagine a person's got a budget constraint. They can spend it all on Big Macs. They spend it all on French fries. They've got an indifference curve maximized at point bundle B1, which determines how many Big Macs they buy and how many French fries they buy. Fine. Now McDonald's has a sale, reduces the price of French fries. Price of Big Mac stays constant. So we draw a new budget constraint. Once again, the person finds a higher indifference curve. They're better off. They choose a new bundle B2 like this. But you'll notice something in this case. At bundle B2, the person buys more French fries. Well, they're cheaper. But the person also chooses to buy more Big Macs. This too, again, look carefully at the shape of the indifference curves. You'll notice what's going on here. And so in this case, we say that these goods are complements. The strict definition of it is if the price of good X goes down, in this case the French fries are cheaper, it not only means that the person purchases more French fries, but they also purchase more of the other good, which is a complement. So good X and good Y are complements in this case.